Okay, everybody, here is my video response for the discussion this week. Section 1. What instructional strategies engaged you most as a student? Why do you think this was true? Do these same strategies engage you as a post-secondary student? Why or why not? I think generally I lean towards um, being able to learn by doing stuff. So whether that was like shop class, show me how to do it. I'm gonna practice doing it, and then I'll learn from that. But a lot of that has to do with like the subject material. Uh, so obviously you can't do hands-on stuff. I mean, you can do hands-on stuff with other subjects, but hands-on learning was probably more effective for me, or at least more interesting. But I would say things I do a lot better with lectures than with reading material because I think when I read, I have the tendency to, my mind wanders a little bit more if I'm just reading something. But if there is a lecture happening and I'm taking notes on the lecture, then that helps me stay more engaged. Whereas, like, if I'm reading something and taking notes, I'm not quite as engaged because even as I'm reading, I'm have the tendency for my mind to wander. But if there's an audio situation, I'm listening and writing down things at the same time. I don't know. It just seems like I'm more engaged that way. If I have children or young siblings, what strategies engage them in learning? So my oldest daughter is 7. She just finished kindergarten, um, and my middle child will be in kindergarten this year. So I think what engages them in learning the most is their interest in something. So it seems like, uh, we're haven't gotten too far in instructional strategies with them yet. It's just we've had to practice, writing their letters and some simple math stuff. But I would say encourage them to ask questions and uh, they're more interested in learning when they have questions. So just lean into those situations and use that natural inquiry to guide that learning. How did your K through 12 teachers most commonly provide instruction to you? Which methods were most effective and why? Um, like I kind of said before, well, most of my teaching, so like in English, we would usually have something we had to read and then we'd have some homework on it. And in history, social studies, it was usually a lecture and we were taking notes and then we would have a test on the information. And in math, he's teaching you how to do the math on the board and then we had to practice it and then go from there. In shop class, it's show me how to do the thing. This is how you measure and cut and XYZ, and then we're going to do it. So that's how most of that went, as far as I can remember. What was most effective, kind of like I mentioned before, like if there's a lecture and I'm taking notes on the lecture, that's pretty effective for me. Whereas like shop class, where you show me how to do it and then I get to practice it, that worked pretty well. Math class, not so much. Well, depending on the math. I'm not very good at trigonometry. I couldn't do any of it now. But, you know, things that I would classify as easy, I guess. That worked okay. But when I got into trig, I had no idea what was going on. I can't do trig now anymore. I couldn't do it then. So, why were they more effective? And I think really it just had to do with material. Like history is just facts, and there's not really a lot of interpretation to it. So you put the facts on the board, say them out loud. I'm gonna take notes on it. That works pretty well for me. English, where we're having to interpret literature, not as interesting, I'll read it, but like I said, I have a tendency, like if I'm reading something, my mind will wander into something else. Um, Math, I remember Pythagorean theorem. That seemed pretty useful to me because you use it in construction. Um, so I think probably the most effective strategy that I've had was just audio and taking notes on it, but that doesn't apply in every situation. So, um, why do teachers and counselors need to highlight critical information? How will you practice this? Obviously, we need to make it known what the most important things to remember are. Um, that can be difficult because we can perhaps think that everything is just as important, but if we can really dial it into what do these students actually need to know, um, as far as the standards go or whatever, um, just trying to be more efficient, that's important. And how do I practice this every every time my students come in and lift. The first thing we do is called a prayer squat, and they hear these cues repeated 5 times every single day when they come in, and they're the same. So in my assignment, I wrote they hear it at least once a day, and then I did it after I wrote the assignment, and I realized they hear it at least 5 times because we start off with 5 prayer squats, and they hear the commands for the process of it every single time. And so that information is like that. The squat is the basis of everything we do, or at least that I do with strength conditioning, and a lot of things stem from that. But so just dialing it into what they actually have to know, I think, is really important. Second question I'm going to answer: why should teachers practice cumulative review throughout this school year? How will you incorporate this as a teacher? Getting the students to understand that everything kind of builds on itself. Like we're building towards something the whole time, I think is important. So obviously, if you're implementing cumulative review, that builds on itself, right? And that happens in strength conditioning. We start with a prayer squat, and then that turns into a goblet squat where we have some weight with it, and then that turns into a barbell squat, and it's just a different thing. It's progressing on itself. We start with a barbell deadlift, and we add some weight to it, and then when we're good enough at that, then we can throw in something like a power clean. And it's just everything is always building on itself for whatever we're trying to accomplish at the end. And then the last question that I'm going to answer is, why is homework one of the most misused strategies in K through 12 classrooms? What considerations should teacher make when assigning homework? I don't think that homework should be used as I'm kind of of the opinion that the learning should happen in the classroom and homework should only be used if absolutely necessary. So when I was doing long-term sub work, I really tried to not have homework like we talked about last week. These kids have lives of their own outside of school, and I really don't want school to go into that as much as I possibly can. So really, the only time I would usually use homework is if we didn't get done in class what we were supposed to do for the day, because whether it had been like the students weren't as engaged, or if I felt like it was the students' fault that we didn't get done what we needed to do, then we'd have homework because they weren't paying attention. You're wasting our class time. So I'm not saying I'm like intentionally wasting your outside of school time, but because we didn't get done in class what we need to do, and I don't think that was like, I'm okay if we don't get everything done and you're engaged, but if you're not engaged and we don't get things done, then now you have to do it on your own. So that's kind of how I think about homework. And so I think if homework is going to be used, it needs to be communicated what the purpose of it is, and it needs to be something that's not going to take forever, and it's something that they can do that directly applies, and they understand how it applies. I'm coming up on 10 minutes here, so I was trying to get my thoughts down, and that's it for my video.